central Saudi Arabia, in the easternmost part of Saudi Arabia, in what would be the largest U.S. air base in that part of the country, a steady stream of fighter bombers have been taking off for quite some time. Now, let us underscore to you that insofar as it can be determined, what has begun right now is the air war. Ground troops, U.S. ground forces, Marines, Army troops, insofar as anyone can determine, while they are poised to strike, have, so far as we know, not, let me underscore the word not yet, started to actually strike. Let's go to David Martin, our CBS News Defense Department correspondent at the Pentagon. David?
Dan, these F-15Es that were reported taking off from central Saudi Arabia, those are aircraft which are designed to fly very low at night, and they carry 12 500-pound bombs. And if you believe the pilots who fly them, they can use, with computer-assisted bomb sights, they can hit within 15 to 30 meters of their target. They go in very low.
Well, unfortunately, we lost our audio and video to David Martin at the Pentagon, but what David was doing was bringing us up to date on the kind of attack that is obviously underway against targets in Kuwait and or Iraq at the moment.
For those of you who have just joined us, we've been listening to CBS News correspondent Dan Rather. This is Frank Sedapani in New York with CBS News correspondent Doug Poling and military affairs analyst Ben Works with our continuing live coverage of the outbreak of hostilities in the Persian Gulf. To briefly summarize what has happened this evening, war with Iraq began early Thursday in Saudi Arabia as a squadron of U.S. fighter bombers took off from the largest airbase in central Saudi Arabia. In Baghdad, there have been numerous reports of bombs falling on the center of the Iraqi capital. CNN moments ago reported that the bombing had intensified and that refineries have now been hit, oil refineries. So the Persian Gulf has, in fact, exploded. The official announcement of this from the White House came a short time ago from Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater, and here it is.
I have a statement by the President of the United States. The liberation of Kuwait has begun. In conjunction with the forces of our coalition partners, the United States has moved under the code name Operation Desert Storm to enforce the mandates of the United Nations Security Council. As of 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Operation Desert Storm forces were engaging targets in Kuwait and Iraq. President Bush will address the nation at 9 o'clock p.m. tonight from the Oval Office. I'll try to get you more as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
And so that was the announcement from Marlin Fitzwater that war has broken out in the Persian Gulf. There are reports now that the city of Baghdad is blacked out. Ben Works, whether that's by design or whether that's as the result of some military activity, I suppose we really have no way of knowing at this point.
This is live coverage of the CBS radio network on WWJ News Radio 95.
To get an emergency blackout, or it may be that we have already started to shut down Saddam's infrastructure. The power plants, we are getting reports that the refineries are already being hit, and that in fact that we may be making effective war in the first wave against his key war-making industries and his war-making centers of resistance. We are not yet receiving reports of random acts against the people, but against his industries and himself.
Ben, we were told one of the first things to expect would be attacks on the chemical warfare plants, the places where this stuff is stored, the depots, and also the factories where it's made. I haven't heard anything like that yet. I'm a little surprised that they went after the refineries first.
Well, this again, those chemical manufacturing plants are one set of targets. They are well outside of Baghdad, and they would be addressed by other forces, and we will not get reports because there are not Americans out there.
I'm also interested, what do you think about reports of attacks in Kuwait? What might they be hitting in Kuwait?
In Kuwait, you have operational level and tactical level targets. There are, of course, corps headquarters and major supply depots. At the front lines, we may well be already attending to Saddam's field artillery and barrage rockets, which may have chemical warheads targeted against the front lines of our allies. I would advise that most American troops are well back from artillery range other than Marine Corps personnel along the coast. So that mostly they are our Arab troops along the Kuwaiti border, most at risk from the first wave of chemical attack.
If they're using these Tomahawk cruise missiles, I believe those are fired from battleships such as the Wisconsin. Now, they kept those under wraps while I was there. They wouldn't let us see them for security reasons, but tell us something about them.
Well, officially, of course, still the Tomahawk has two ranges, either a 500-mile range where it can hit within a 25-foot circle, or at as far as 1,200 miles, they can still hit within a football field. They're very suitable to known fixed targets. They hug the ground, and they travel at about 600 miles an hour, and we do have somewhat over 500 available for launch from several different classes of platforms. Perhaps we can get back to this?
Okay, fine. We have some late word from Bob Simon in Saudi Arabia. Let's hear that.
We've received an additional detail just in the last few minutes that from a central airbase in central Saudi Arabia, from a large airbase there, C-130 transport planes have been taking off every few minutes for the last hour. Right now I can hear more aircraft taking off around me right here in eastern Saudi Arabia. Let me emphasize that recently, yesterday in fact, a senior Air Force commander here predicted that the air war, the establishing superiority in the air, would take the Air Force approximately 2 days as long as Saddam did not hide any of his planes. This Air Force commander thought that Saddam would engage the American Air Force, that he would lose, and that if he put all his planes up at once, it would take the Americans 2 days to clear the skies. Here are some more fighters taking off right now. I can't tell if they're F-15s or Tornadoes. They are one or the other. Those are the kinds of aircraft which are housed in this base here. The Air Force commander also said that he expected that the Americans would take some losses, that some American planes would be shot down. We'll have an answer to that, I'm afraid, within the next couple of days.
Okay, Ben Works has been listening to the latest from Bob Simon in Saudi Arabia, and Ben, as you read between the lines of that, what more can you tell us?
To the best of our understanding, F-15s taking off from Dhahran are in the air superiority role, so that we are, again, forcing Saddam's Air Force down to the ground.
Frank, one thing I can tell you, Bob is in an excellent position to see those. The Dhahran International Hotel, which is where our base was, the CBS News office, is right literally next door to that air base. And if he's standing out there on the roof of the hotel, which he was a moment ago, I saw the live pictures on the monitors, you can see them and hear them. Of course, in the dark you may not be able to see them, but you can certainly hear them because it's within a half a mile of where he's standing.
A moment ago, you two were discussing the capability of the Tomahawk missiles. What about the capability of these warplanes that are going in? What can they do?
Well, again, the F-15E model is a ground attack version. It has 500-pound bombs. It operates very low altitude, in a capable pilot's hand, very accurate.
Okay, now let's interrupt and join Dan Rather.
Simon, in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. Bob?
Dan, I don't know how good this audio is, but the siren started about 30 seconds ago, and we don't know what it means. We don't know if it means anything. People have been very nervous here all day, and of course nerves have gone up enormously in the last half hour. The Americans have been saying from the very start, and have reinforced over the last couple of days, that they do expect Saddam Hussein to try and send something down here, perhaps in the way of Scud missiles, perhaps even some aircraft. People around the hotel we've been staying have been walking around with their gas masks all day, and this is hardly a surprise. This was expected. It might mean nothing. It might mean that somebody knows that something is on the way. Dan?
Bob, are the air raid sirens still sounding?
The air raid sirens are sounding, and another siren has just begun. I believe that is a siren for people in the hotel to go down to a shelter.
Let's, just for 1 second then, Bob, keep an open microphone. Perhaps we've lost our audio. Let's keep an open microphone and listen to that noise for just a moment, that sound. The sound of war in Saudi Arabia as air raid warnings are sounding around the largest American base, military base in Saudi Arabia, around Dhahran. Now, if you want to look at the map, as a matter of fact, Bob Schieffer, we can go to you very quickly. You can show us, you and General Chris, roughly where Dhahran is, if you're prepared to do so. Dhahran is right there. Would you point again, General, if you don't mind?
Right.
Well, that's Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. You see the Persian Gulf, Kuwait above it, and you see where Dhahran is. That's where Bob Simon was a moment ago, and where he says that they're going into bomb shelters in Dhahran. Bob Simon has just left his broadcasting place to head for one of the shelters. Now, we have lost our signal to Dhahran. Perhaps you saw a flash up on the screen there. We no longer have a signal to Dhahran. Now, in the spirit of what we know and what we don't know, we do not know that there's an airstrike underway against American forces in Dhahran. What we do know is that U.S. forces have launched airstrikes against Iraq and Kuwait, both by manned aircraft and, we believe, by unmanned cruise-style missiles. Air raid signals sounded around Dhahran, as you heard Bob Simon report. Then everybody was told to head for the shelters. Whether there's an attack or whether it was simply an alert, we do not know. Now, you heard Bob Simon talk about the so-called Scud missile. The Scud missile is the best that the Iraqis have. It has the reputation of, one, having fairly short range, but enough range to reach targets in Saudi Arabia, including Dhahran. It has the reputation of being a very inaccurate missile. Now there are air raid sirens in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Now we want to go to the map and show you where Riyadh is. If we can get the map up, we try to keep you posted on the map where things are happening. Riyadh is the capital of Saudi Arabia. Again, people are moving to the air raid shelters there. On the map, you can see Riyadh is more in the center of the country, the major cities in Saudi Arabia that for the moment you want to have in mind. Dhahran, where the big U.S. base is over near the Persian Gulf. Riyadh in more or less the middle part of Saudi Arabia. And then Jeddah, which is over on the Red Sea, which is far away from Iraq and not under what we might call ordinary combat circumstances reachable by the Iraqi missiles. Now, again, underscoring, we do not know whether Dhahran or Riyadh is actually under attack. We do know that air raid signals have gone off in both places and people have moved to the shelters. Now, we believe we can hear the air raid sirens sounding in Dhahran, so let's pause and listen to the sounds of war. This is from Riyadh. These are the sounds of Riyadh as war begins in the Middle East.
This is live coverage from the CBS radio network on WWJ News Radio 95.
Air raid sirens in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. As you look at the map, you could tell Riyadh is, I emphasize, is the capital of Saudi Arabia. Although Jeddah is its biggest commercial city, which is on the Red Sea. As you looked at the map, Jeddah would be off to the left, off to the west, and Dhahran would be off to the east. Now, trying to bring you up to date very quickly on what we know and what we don't know. War in the Middle East, combat around the Persian Gulf. Offensive strikes by the U.S. Air Force, by, we believe, U.S. Navy and Marine aircraft as well, although we do not know about the latter. The only thing that's been officially announced by any military spokesman is the engagement of U.S. F-15E fighter bombers, those aircraft designed to knock out Iraqi planes from the sky if necessary, and also capable of attacking targets on the ground. David Martin at the Pentagon has reported that his information is that U.S. cruise-style missiles, known as Tomahawks, the particular style of cruise missile being used in this instance, also have been launched against targets in Iraq and possibly also in Kuwait. We do not know the extent of the attacks in Iraq and Kuwait. What we do know is that the raids have been underway for about 2 hours now. Our most reliable information from U.S. military sources, this was official information, is that the raids began about 4:50 this afternoon Eastern Time. We had some indication of them as we began the CBS Evening News at 6:30 this evening Eastern Time, and then as the evening news developed, it became clear that the air war had begun. I want to pause and again emphasize, and particularly for those of you who are just now joining our coverage, so far as can be determined, the air war has started. No offensive action on the ground that anyone can determine. The sequence of events that happened today, in no particular order, there were reports that Saddam Hussein was making efforts to move his chemical warfare machinery closer to U.S. forces in Saudi Arabia. Quickly behind that came an even more heightened alert for U.S. forces in and around Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf. And then there was silence, as there frequently is just before an offensive attack. And then the United States attacked targets in Iraq and in Kuwait using manned aircraft. When we say manned aircraft, it's easy when you put up a picture, as we did, of that F-15E, to think of it as a highly sophisticated piece of technological weaponry, and that it is. But in the cockpit is a young man, average age 22, 23 years old, who just a few short years ago was quarterbacking his high school football team, or maybe looking for a jump shot at the top of the key. There are people, there are men in those aircraft. Yes, there are women who fly in the U.S. military, but by law, women are not allowed to be in combat units, so there'll be no women in the cockpits of these particular airplanes. Now, we want to go to Tom Fenton in Israel. Tom Fenton by telephone from Israel. Tom, any sign of activity, special activity there, and what do you hear, what do you know?
Well, no sign of special activity yet, although one of Israeli radio's monitors said that he cannot find Baghdad radio, so presumably it's off the air. But earlier this evening, Prime Minister Shamir indicated that the United States has apparently dropped its reluctance to coordinate its air battle plans with Israel. Shamir said on television that there's some sort of an agreement with the United States and that Israel was maintaining contact. Now, Saddam Hussein, as you know, has threatened to hit Israel if he's attacked, and presumably he would hit Israel with chemical weapons. The Israelis have made it clear that they would retaliate and would not just let the U.S. Air Force do the job of taking out the missiles. So there was a great deal of worry that Israeli planes and American planes would be in the air at the same time, and perhaps American pilots and Israeli pilots might shoot each other down. The agreement, if there has been an agreement, sort of clears the decks now for the Israeli Air Force to take action. Israeli planes have been in the air on a round-the-clock basis. Whether they will now do something before Israel is hit, if it is hit, is unclear. We're in sort of a gray area now. It wouldn't be a preemptive strike because there's a war already going on. So we'll just have to wait until we get an announcement, and one I think is expected soon.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to try to go to General Michael Dugan, the retired commander of the United States Air Force, very recently retired. I'm told that we can't get General Dugan up at the moment. One of the important questions of the hour is if Iraqi missiles or planes are attacking Saudi Arabia, what their likely targets would be. We have air raid sirens in both Dhahran and in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and people moving to air raid shelters in both places. We do not know whether any actual Iraqi attacks are underway. The Iraqis are most likely to try to attack with their Scud missiles. Bob Schieffer is with General George Christ, the retired United States Marine General. Bob, taking into account everything that we know and heard thus far, what is your and General Christ's best assessment of what's probably happening, while emphasizing that it's, so far as we know, it's an air war here in the early hours?
Well, that seems to be what it is, doesn't it, General? This region is exploding. And one bit of information, Dan, that we've just gotten here. An AP network news reporter named Tony Winton, in an urgent voice over a telephone just a moment ago, said, Washington, we're seeing activity in the hotel. He is in Dhahran. After saying that, his line went dead. So this fits in with the other things that we're hearing from Bob Simon. General, when the air raid sirens were heard in Dhahran, what would the Iraqis use to attack Dhahran, and had that been expected?
Well, the Iraqis have three kinds of bombers. A Su-24 that's very much like our own F-111, Tu-16, Tu-20. These are good long-range bombers. He also has missiles, what is known the Al-Hussein missile, which is a modified Scud missile. That's got about a 390-mile range, and that can cover this area. Now, we have air defenses between that, the Patriot missiles, the Hawk missiles, that can take down, or at least we think they can take down, those incoming Scud missiles. We also, of course, have the F-15s in the air and the F-A-18s fighter aircraft up there with AWACS, so it's going to be difficult for him to get his airplanes through. But he has the capability, Bob.
Now, let's go back and talk about when the reporters first saw those flashes of light on the horizon back up in Baghdad. Were they seeing, could they see as far as Kuwait, or were they seeing something very near the downtown Baghdad area? What would you
they're seeing these airports, these major airfields, about 3 or so, within very close distance of Baghdad. There's also some command centers up there, air defense centers, so they're probably seeing that under attack. I think, Bob, that attacks are also going on at airfields in the north and airfields south of Baghdad that generally run along the river all the way down to Kuwait with the air defenses. I think that there are other airplanes on those F-15Es in the air now going after those things.
Well, this is going exactly as you and other military experts have suspected that it would, and that is some sort of an air attack, apparently massive air attacks. What do you think is happening right now from what we know, General?
Well, what I think is happening right now is that first their surface-to-air missiles are now being taken out by the F-4G, the Wild Weasel aircraft, and the EA-6As being jammed as they try to get rid of those air defenses. At the same time, they're attacking those airfields, trying to get the airplanes on the grounds and in their shelters, going after communication centers, and the missiles that have everybody warned about, I think they're going after too, Bob.
Thank you, General. Back to you, Dan.
CBS News producer and reporter John Reed is in a protective bunker in Dhahran. Remember, that's on the eastern coast of Saudi Arabia, near the Persian Gulf. John, what's happening there at the moment?
Well, it's just everybody. Hello, Dan. It's just everybody sitting around down in the basement of the International Hotel here. The sirens went off. We tried to broadcast as long as possible, as you know. And then the hotel cut the power. I'm sure it's for lights out and for safety. We have no idea whether there's any real air raid about. None of us are going to gamble with that, or of course, we're going to stay down here in the basement until it's all clear. Everybody just grabbed their gas masks and their chemical suits and ran down in the dark.
Thank you very much, John Reed. Let's leave that map up for just a moment, if you will, please, because it will help us orient people. As you look at the map, there have been air raid sirens. That doesn't necessarily mean air attacks. Air raid sirens in Riyadh, in the center of Saudi Arabia, the capital of the country. Dhahran there on the coast around the Persian Gulf. Look, just north of Dhahran, there's a road that runs from Dhahran right on up into Kuwait. While Kuwait is not marked on this particular map, it's right there at the, well, you can see it in slight red below Iraq. On that road, leading from Dhahran up to Kuwait, is where the U.S. Marines are basically based. If you look on the map now to the west, that is looking off to the left of the map.
And this is CBS News continuing coverage of the outbreak of the air war in the Persian Gulf. We've been hearing an awful lot this evening in the last few minutes about geography of the region. Doug Poling is recently back from Saudi Arabia. Doug, fill us in on the lay of the land. We're hearing now that air raid sirens have been going off in Dhahran. Apparently there is a good deal of activity there, as well as Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Where are these cities and how close are they to Kuwait?
Well, this is WWJ Detroit.
To say is that we do not know that there have been any counterattacks by the Iraqis on any of these cities in Saudi Arabia. We know that the air raid sirens have gone off and the people have taken to the shelters, and that could be strictly precautionary. I want to stress that we do not know that Saudi Arabia itself is under attack or counterattack. Now, if you think of Saudi Arabia as being a clock, let's look at it that way, then Dhahran would be about 3 o'clock. It's on the eastern coast of Saudi Arabia, on the Persian Gulf, or the Arabian Gulf as they call it there, and it is strategically very important. Riyadh would be over toward the center of the clock, in the middle, and it is the capital. It's about 250 miles west of Dhahran. Dhahran is very important because of the oil refining capacity there. Aramco, the big oil complex, is there. There's a big oil base and the International Hotel. Again, if the Iraqis have countered with Scud missiles, by the way, we must stress that although they're dangerous potentially, they are notoriously inaccurate, and they have a range of less than 200 miles, at least we think they do.
Doug, we know that communications have been disrupted with Dhahran in that city. Radio pool reporter Tony Winton was attempting to file a report when he lost contact with the United States. Here's what it sounded like.
Washington, we're seeing activity here in the hotel. Washington, we're seeing activity here in the hotel. Washington, we're seeing activity here in the hotel.
That's very dramatic.
Washington, Washington, Washington.
That apparently was the end of the transmission. Just a few minutes in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, someone said at a major hotel on the phone, "I can't talk, everyone is gone, there's an air raid emergency." Doug, you've been in those air raid shelters, those bomb shelters. Yes. What are they like?
Yes.
Well, how protective are they?
Well, they give quite a bit of protection. The Dhahran International Hotel is a huge, modern hotel with a concrete structure base, and they took us down to the basement for a drill when I was there. And the basement is underground, and it seems pretty solid. And it's pretty big, so it would hold quite a few people. And now if Tony is in, I know Tony Winton, by the way, I work with him over there. If he's in Riyadh, I'm not quite sure where he is, but he's probably at the Hyatt Regency, which is where the U.S. military in Riyadh is located, and that is also a major hotel, presumably with a very big air raid shelter in the basement.
Let's just sum up. President Bush at 9 o'clock this evening, which is less than 90 minutes from now, is going to address the nation. It has been officially announced at the White House. The announcement came about 30 minutes ago that the air war in the Persian Gulf has commenced with U.S. attacks against Iraq and against Iraqi targets in Kuwait. Ben Works is our CBS News military analyst. And Ben, we've been receiving some late reports from Baghdad now that say that it appears airports and military installations near the city, near the Iraqi capital, have been hit. What do you say about that?
It strikes me as an orderly way of shutting a country down. We are making war at all of Saddam's most important war-making capacities, his airports, his command centers, his national industries. And in fact, it wouldn't surprise me if a couple of Saddam's personal monuments haven't been exploded already as a psychological point. The one thing I am not hearing is that we are not apparently making war on the innocent civilians of the city of Baghdad. These reports are coming from primarily military targets. At the same time, we are already hearing evidence of a growing attack mounted against targets closer to Kuwait and at the front lines. As we get a more evolved picture, we will, of course, give you every detail that is reasonable to report, reasonable to project, without giving away military security or without unnecessarily concerning our listeners.
We heard earlier that about a squadron of F-15 fighters had taken off from Saudi Arabia heading north. For the uninitiated, how many planes in a squadron? How many crew members in each plane?
Well, there would be, in this case, 12 or 24, and these fighters may operate in tactical groups of 6 or even 2. In the air superiority role, they'll be operating in 6s and 12s. There then may add on electronic warfare planes and a wild weasel to take out enemy radars. In the tactical role, the F-15E, which is the reports we're getting out of the central Saudi Arabian airport, may be operating in pairs against logistical targets and command targets in the theater of operations, which is that area, again, of southeast Iraq and Kuwait itself. This is an area that starts about 6 miles behind the front lines and extends up to the Euphrates River. It is where all of that support is centralized and where the armored reserves are as well.
Ben, I can't stress enough the fact that this is exactly, as you say, the way the U.S. military had orchestrated it, and the important thing is that this started at night. These planes, as you know, have tremendous capability to fly and do their thing at night, and it's just going all exactly as though you wrote a script, isn't it? Doesn't it seem that way to you?
Exactly, and of course they have had 4 months plus to plan these missions, to test these missions in simulation after simulation, and to fine-tune it. We have, of course...
The Israeli army has announced a state of emergency and has instructed the population to open its gas mask kits, but not to put them on, just to be ready in case there is, we should point out, word from Tom Fenton that there is no indication yet of any Iraqi attack against Israel. A UN Security Council session that had been scheduled for 6 o'clock this evening, New York time, that was less than 2 hours ago, has been postponed at least until 10:30 p.m. this evening. There is a great deal of activity going on in Washington this evening involving the White House, members of Congress, the Pentagon, as you might suspect. CBS News correspondent Rob Armstrong is standing by in Washington. Rob, we would appreciate your sharing any information that you have with us.
Right. Frank, what we know for sure is the president is going to address the nation from the Oval Office at 9 o'clock. We will probably learn a great deal more at that juncture. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney is then going to make an appearance in the Pentagon briefing room a half hour after the president speaks, and again, we will probably get a lot more information. Right now, everything over here is very sketchy. What we do know is that the top leaders on Capitol Hill were notified that this was going to happen. We're told that Robert Byrd, the president pro tem of the Senate, was told an hour before it happened that at 6 o'clock Eastern time, that indeed in an hour operation, the operation would in fact begin. Tom Foley received notification. We are expecting a written statement from him at some point. Les Aspin, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, may appear in the House Radio and Television Gallery, and of course we are monitoring all of that.
Rob, if I could interrupt, I have a question for you about the timetable that you've just outlined. It is our information that the planes actually began taking off from eastern Saudi Arabia at approximately 10 minutes of 5 Eastern Time, Washington time. That would indicate to us that the planes were in the air before the leaders were notified. Is that the sense that you have of this?
That is entirely possible. There is nothing to contradict that I have heard. What Marlon Fitzwater said was that the whole thing began, that we began engaging forces in Iraq and in Kuwait at 7 o'clock Eastern Time about 41 minutes ago. But that, to get there from Saudi Arabia could indeed have taken that long. Yes, that's entirely possible and entirely consistent.
Rob, what about what lies ahead? We know that the president is going to speak. Are there any plans for any congressional leaders to make statements, for the Secretary of Defense and so forth?
Yes, indeed. Dick Cheney, as I mentioned a moment ago, Dick Cheney will make an appearance in the Pentagon briefing room a half hour after Mr. Bush at 9:30, and we will be prepared to bring you that. We are expecting Les Aspin, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. He will be making an appearance, we believe, in the House Radio and Television Gallery, and we will be prepared to bring you that when he speaks. Bob Dole, the Republican leader in the Senate, may make an appearance. What I was told just a few minutes ago from his office is that he is thinking about whether to appear. Tom Foley, the Speaker of the House, is going to issue a written statement. He so far has indicated that he will not appear before television cameras and radio microphones.
Rob, let me ask you this. You may have covered this before, but let me mention it anyway. Has any member of Congress in a leadership capacity actually come out with a statement at this point?
Not at this point. We are awaiting statements from Capitol Hill, and as soon as we get them, we'll share them with you.
Thank you very much. That was CBS News correspondent Rob Armstrong reporting from Washington. We had a report a moment ago from CBS News in Baghdad that gunfire was heard. Ben Works, the report from Baghdad said that the people there weren't sure if it was incoming or outgoing gunfire. Maybe you could clarify that.
Well, again, they're the men on the spot. So much is going on, they're nervous. But I would say that if you hear gunfire in an air battle from the ground, you're hearing outgoing flak. And this would be light and medium caliber anti-aircraft fire.
You're listening to live coverage of the CBS Radio Network on WWJ News Radio 95.
Got Saudi Arabia with us now. Lucy, what can you tell us about conditions there?
Frank, it's gotten quiet here. About 3.5 hours ago, we started to hear stepped-up air traffic overhead, mostly traffic of transport planes, large ones, we think C-130s, maybe some KC-135. It has gotten very quiet now. About 15 or 20 minutes ago, we heard an air raid siren. Now that has stopped.
Lucy, this is Doug Poling in New York. I'd like to ask you, and I think it's important to clarify, so far there's no evidence that either Riyadh or Dhahran or anywhere in Saudi Arabia that you know of has actually been hit in any kind of counterattack by the Iraqis, that this is strictly defensive, what's taking place. Is that true?
It certainly is true here in Riyadh. I'm not in contact with Dhahran, but certainly that is true here in Riyadh. We have not heard any loud noises or anything that would indicate an attack is ongoing.
I thought that might be important to clear up because we've heard so much about Scud missiles and what the Iraqis might try with, but so far this is just prudent civil defense, at least where you are in Riyadh.
Absolutely true. Absolutely right.
All right. Now, if you will, if there's anything else that we need to know or you can tell us, we'd sure like to hear it while we got you.
I think it's so quiet here you can almost hear a pin drop after all the noise of the planes passing over before.
And you're not in an air raid shelter yourself?
Not at the moment, no.
Tell me where you're at if you can.
I'm on the fourth floor of the hotel.
Yeah, and I assume, I don't know whether, I hope I'm not giving anything away, but I assume this is the same hotel in Riyadh that we're all so familiar with, where there's so much activity going on?
No, I believe you're referring to a hotel in another part of Saudi Arabia.
Lucy, I'm sorry I didn't hear your last answer there, but anyway, is the city darkened? Has it been blacked out?
I'm looking out the window now. No, I see lights all over.
And what about power in the hotel? Do you have it?
Yes, absolutely.
What about gas masks and chemical gear? Have you donned that? Have you been told to put it on?
There is actually no one to tell us to put it on. Some people have donned it and some have not.
Have they given you any information, the military there, as to what's going on?
No, they haven't. They haven't. They have deferred all questions until after the president speaks.
And you haven't heard anything from Dhahran. We've lost contact pretty much with Dhahran. How about you? Are you in contact with them at all?
No, we are not. Apparently, my understanding, and this is listening to the network back, that the power has been cut there, and we are unable to get through on our telephone.
So it looks like there's more of a civil defense emergency in Dhahran rather than in Riyadh. Would that be accurate, do you think?
I would think so, yes.
Well, Lucy, thank you very much, and you take care of yourself. And we're going now to,
Robert Berger.
Robert Berger in Tel Aviv. Robert, are you on the line?
Yes, and I'm in Jerusalem.
I'm sorry, Jerusalem. Well, tell us what's going on there.
Well, so far, there's a strange kind of quiet here. The sirens have not been sounded. Most of the reports coming across the radio are coming from American reporters in Baghdad or Saudi Arabia. But an initial state of emergency has been declared. The Army spokesman has told people that they should take out their protective kits. Everyone has been issued a gas mask here in Israel, and people have been told to get these out, to open up the boxes. Until now, that's been forbidden. They've been told to open up the boxes, to have the kits at hand. But so far, people have not been told to put the gas masks on. People have been told to stay at home, to go into a sealed room, which most people have set aside in their homes. But so far, as I said, the sirens have not gone off.
Robert, I want to clarify, and I think we need to stress again, so far as we know, nothing has been hit or attacked in Israel or in Saudi Arabia per se. As far as we know, the military action is the United States going after targets in Iraq and Kuwait. So far, there's been no counterattack.
That Israel has not been attacked. Sorry, did you hear me?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that? I think we had a little cross signals there.
Okay, what I was saying is it appears, it seems very clear that Israel has not been attacked because, as I said, the sirens have not gone off, and they would go off immediately in the event of any kind of missiles coming in. I would just remind everyone that Saddam Hussein has threatened to hit Israel with chemical weapons, with missiles, if in the event of an American attack. So the Air Force and so on has been on a high state of alert, and everyone's just waiting to see now.
All right. Robert, this is Frank Sedapani. I have a question for you. We've just received a notice from AP. Israeli radio stations are saying that Prime Minister Shamir and Defense Minister Ahrens were at home receiving reports on the assault on Iraq. There were no immediate signs of a threatened Iraqi attack on Israel. What can you tell us about anything that might be going on among the upper echelons of government in Israel?
Well, of course, the Army and the higher echelons are meeting now to see just what eventuality is going to take place. I mean, the question in everyone's mind in Israel is Saddam going to carry out his threat or his promise to hit Israel? They take these threats here very seriously, and as you said, these leaders are obviously holding very high-level consultations at this point to see if any kind of attack is going to take place. So far, there's a strange kind of quiet here. As I said, I'm actually rather surprised that they haven't sounded the sirens yet. Probably most people in Israel are still asleep.
Robert, one question on how much advance warning and notice the people of Israel would have. How quickly could an attack be detected, and how much time would they have to prepare?
Well, that's been a subject of intensive debate here for the past couple of months. Some say it's about 6 minutes, that if Israel has the proper radar detection and intelligence, they would have 6 minutes from the time Iraq launched a missile to get ready before it would actually hit Israel. That's the time, I guess, it would take for a missile to fly from western Iraq into Israel. That's the minimum. I suppose a maximum amount of time would maybe be 15, 20 minutes.
What would be the nature of any Israeli response? Is there any informed opinion on what kind of weaponry might be used?
Well, Israel has threatened a devastating, crushing response. The Air Force would probably be the prime instrument in this kind of a thing. Also, Israel does have missiles. Israel has not really advertised that much the kind of weapons that they have, but the feeling is that the Air Force would do most of the work in a case like that. Probably very heavy bombing, but also Israel does have Jericho surface-to-surface missiles, and could fire those at Iraq as well.
Robert, unfortunately, I didn't hear the last thing you said. What is the status of the Israeli nuclear program, and what, if any, indication is there that if a chemical attack were launched on Israel, that Israel would respond with nuclear weapons?
Well, I think that's pretty unlikely. Of course, Israel has never publicly stated that it has nuclear weapons, although it's widely believed by just about everyone that it does. It does have a nuclear reactor in southern Israel. I don't think that the Israelis would use a nuclear weapon unless it was really a situation where Israel's existence would be threatened. I think they would answer a chemical attack with a devastating conventional response. A lot of bombing and possibly missiles. Israel, of course, also has chemical weapons and even biological weapons.
What about the Syrians? Are they anticipating any attack by the Syrians?
That is a source of concern.
I don't know. I think we've lost Robert Berger in Jerusalem. Our line has gone out. We might point out that communications throughout the Middle East and throughout the Persian Gulf could best be described as dicey at this point. CBS News in London tells us that the phone lines to Baghdad have been cut. We've lost communication on and off during the evening with Saudi Arabia. We were able to get through moments ago to Riyadh, but we haven't been able to reestablish contact with Tehran. So there is a massive communications problem. Our coverage of the outbreak of the air war in the Persian Gulf includes comments by Ben Works, who is a CBS News military analyst, and CBS News correspondent Doug Poling, who is just back from Saudi Arabia. Ben, perhaps you could expand on some of the implications as you see them at this point of the military activity that's underway.
Yes, now we have been having action for some almost an hour and a half now, haven't we? And the window is closing for Saddam very rapidly now. His capabilities are severely limited. It would be surprising to me personally that he has any aircraft left in the ground, and the window of danger to Israel is now getting narrower and narrower.
Ben, I'm going to have to interrupt again, and with apologies. Dan Raviv is standing by in London with the latest from the British capital. Dan, go ahead, please.
Frank, as though to underline that this is not only a United States effort, but an allied affair, this fight against Iraq to liberate Kuwait, the British Defense Ministry has just announced that British forces have also been in action. No surprise here. Sources at the Ministry of Defense went on to explain that these were bombers, Royal Air Force Tornado GR-1 fighter bombers. They've been based in the Gulf since the beginning of this crisis. Their mission to destroy Iraqi airfields and radar installations. They have special kinds of bombs, in effect little cluster bomblets, which can make airfields, runways in particular, unusable. So many explosions at once. No word yet on any losses among Allied aircraft, and no word as to the success of these missions. The Prime Minister, John Major, will be making a statement about breakfast time, according to British sources, and this means about 6 or 7 hours from now.
Dan, did you mention any numbers of planes involved? How big a presence?
The British are continuing to be secretive about how many planes took part, but it's my understanding that the British had somewhere around 4 dozen aircraft, the GR-1 Tornadoes, ready for action as fighter bombers, in particular bombers, to attack those Iraqi air bases.
And these planes were based where?
They were based in Saudi Arabia at a base in eastern Saudi Arabia. I nearly said the name, but recall that under the rules, we are not supposed to say where the Allied aircraft are, as well as in another country, and that I think we are allowed to say, Bahrain.
Okay. Dan, what is the total number of British forces in the Gulf, both ground forces and air forces?
The British have 35,000 troops there, nothing like the number of Americans, but throughout the British, especially under Margaret Thatcher, and since then under John Major, since he took office in late November, have been proud to say that the 35,000 Britons will play a full role in liberating Kuwait.
Earlier today, both the National Assembly and the Senate gave permission for President Mitterrand to use French forces in the fighting, and in fact, Mitterrand has said that they would be involved. Are you in London getting any reports from Paris this evening that French forces have in fact joined the British troops?
No, Frank, as of yet, no word, but about 12 hours ago at a briefing, senior British officials said that they fully expected the French to take part. They said that the Foreign Legion and other French forces would not simply stand idly by. That was the British understanding.
What is the mood of the British people about all this? In this country, of course, we've had some anti-war demonstrations over the past 2 days. They seem to be subsiding a little bit today. What is the mood of the people there toward the use of military force in the Gulf, and particularly toward the use of British forces?
Frank, there's no doubt that compared with the situation in the United States, there has been a lot more support here in Great Britain. One reason is the Falklands conflict. The fact that in 1982, when Argentina grabbed the Falklands, the British sent their navy over that long distance into the South Atlantic and successfully recaptured those islands. The point being that a military victory is achievable. There's no Vietnam syndrome here, nothing negative per se about the use of military force. So the fact is that about 26 hours ago, when the House of Commons voted, among the members of Parliament, it was a 10-to-1 margin in favor of government policy, in effect, the green light for war. Frank?
And that was CBS News correspondent Dan Raviv in London. Briefly, to summarize what has happened, the United States is this evening at war in the Persian Gulf. An air war is underway. The exact dimensions of it we do not know at this point. President Bush will be reporting to the nation on the extent of military activity in about 1 hour from now. We're going to pause at this point for about 2 minutes. This is continuing coverage of the war in the Persian Gulf on the CBS Radio Network.
You're listening to WWJ News Radio 95.
All news, all the time. News Radio 95, WWJ, Detroit.
Good evening, I'm Paul Snyder. Let's see if Don Tanner is still over at the auto show to give us a traffic report. Don, are you there?
Yes, I am, Paul. Thanks. I-96 eastbound at Mount Hope Road in Lansing, you'll find traffic reduced from 3 down to 2 lanes of travel. And also in Livingston County, I-96 eastbound between M59 and Chilson Road. Watch for some lane closures due to reconstruction there. Don Tanner, WWJ Traffic.
And WWJ's AccuWeather is forecasting breezy and colder conditions tonight. Wet snow before midnight will coat the ground. Although rain and drizzle will be mixed in at times, we'll have a low tonight of 30. Tomorrow, look for variable cloudiness, brisk and cold with a few flurries and a high temperature of 35. Cold tomorrow night with flurries. A coating is again possible with a low of 23. Friday, cold with clouds and occasional sunshine. A couple more flurries in the offing and a high temperature near 30. Right now, light snow and 34 degrees. As WWJ keeps you abreast of developments in the Persian Gulf, WWJ's team coverage shapes up this way, and of course we'll be going back to CBS News in just a moment. Cliff Russell is at Wayne State University gauging reaction tonight. Greg Bowman is at the North American International Auto Show. Roberta Jacina is out and about downtown Detroit sampling public reaction, and Gary Baumgarten is checking reaction from Detroit's Chaldean community, and we'll have reports from those reporters and the entire WWJ News team as the evening progresses. As an Israeli diplomat visiting Detroit, in addition, says that Michiganians with relatives in Israel should be concerned. Now back to CBS News.
You're tuned to News Radio 95, WWJ, Detroit. Let's rejoin CBS News and continuing coverage of the unfolding events in the Persian Gulf.
CBS News. I'm Jim Chenevey. This is history in the making. That's how one U.S. military commander described the beginning of the U.S.-led attack on Iraq and Kuwait. Military warfare began just about an hour ago, according to White House spokesman Marlon Fitzwater, with air attacks on Iraqi positions in Iraq and Kuwait. More from reporter Barry Bagnato in Washington.
6 words, and America is at war.
The liberation of Kuwait has begun.
White House spokesman Marlon Fitzwater officially announced that attacks have begun to implement the United Nations resolutions demanding the removal of Iraqi troops from Kuwait. Planning has been underway feverishly at the White House and the Pentagon in anticipation of this strike, which is being called Operation Desert Storm.
Operation Desert Storm forces were engaging targets in Kuwait and Iraq.
The president will address the nation at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Barry Bagnato, CBS News, Washington.
CBS News Pentagon correspondent David Martin says cruise missiles have been fired as part of the attack. No confirmation of any ground-based attacks as yet. There have been reports of anti-aircraft fire in and around Baghdad. Reports from the Iraqi capital have had explosions and machine gun fire heard in the background. Reporters have indicated that bombs are falling in the center of the Iraqi capital. There have also been reports that the airport and other installations may have already come under attack. No confirmation of that. There is a report that phone lines went out in Baghdad just after midnight local time. That would have been a full 3 hours before the attack began. It's just after 4 a.m. there now, a moonless night, which is seen as perfect conditions for the U.S.-led air attacks. The U.S.-led Gulf forces are seen by experts as having air superiority, while Iraq has its massive ground forces. Air raid sirens have been heard in Saudi Arabia. Residents there moving into bomb shelters. Israel also under a state of full alert. Correspondent Tom Fenton has more on that.
That was the Israeli army spokesman who declared the state of emergency, and he instructed the public to open up these little gas mask kit boxes we've all been carrying around with us for the last few days. They contain gas masks with filters for chemical warfare, atropine syringes, an antidote to nerve gas. The public has been told to open up these kits, which were sealed when they were given them, but not to put the masks on yet. As you know, Saddam Hussein threatened to attack Israel if he were attacked, and the assumption is that the attack would be with chemical weapons, missiles, Scud missiles, which could hit Tel Aviv and tipped with chemical warheads. Iraq is expected or suspected of having as many as 20 chemical warheads. It's not known, however, whether any of these have been loaded onto missiles. Israel has pinpointed a number of missile sites in western Iraq that it would hit if attacked, and has even indicated it might go so far as to attack Baghdad.
Correspondent David Martin reported earlier that there were indications that Iraq had been moving those chemical weapons out of storage in Iraq and might be preparing to use them. Retired Air Force Colonel Michael Dugan is a CBS News consultant. He assesses Iraq's use of those chemical-loaded Scud missiles.
The Scud missile has a decent range, but it's not a particularly accurate missile. Indeed, some military analysts have said that it is not militarily effective because while it might come close to an air base, it might come close to a major military formation, it in fact will not key in on specific identifiable targets at the headquarters of that formation. So Scud missiles with chemical warheads on them, for example, against a well-prepared and well-trained army that has chemical decontamination equipment, that has gas masks, has chemical suits, is not a particularly effective military weapon. It's a terrorist weapon.
White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater says President Bush will deliver an address to the nation in 1 hour from now. He'll be followed by Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney and Colin Powell. To recap, war has begun in the Persian Gulf with U.S.-led attacks in Iraq.
With the forces of our coalition partners, the United States has moved under the code name Operation Desert Storm to enforce the mandates of the United Nations Security Council. As of 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Operation Desert Storm forces were engaging targets in Kuwait and Iraq. President Bush will address the nation at 9 o'clock p.m. tonight from the Oval Office. I'll try to get you more as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
Marlon